When most people think about the Upper East Side, they think of the Gold Coast. They think of the Metropolitan Museum and Fifth Avenue. What they don't know is the eastern Upper East Side.
I think people would be surprised at how diverse the community is.
I would say that it's a neighborhood, of course, of the very, very wealthy, but it's also a neighborhood of immigrants, of the working class, of the middle class. It's really a microcosm of the history of New York.
I was born on the Upper East Side. I grew up on 74th Street in a lovely little tenement, 5-story walk-up, and I was lucky to be on the 5th floor.
Growing up here, my grandmother would take me to the shop, and it was always just full of life, just hearing German-speaking people in the shop. It was sort of magical for me as a child.
Growing up, we always worked here. I started full-time after college in 1975, and I've been here since.
I'm looking back at being here since 1962, and I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't have this sort of home base.
One of the things that's important to me about the Upper East Side is that it welcomes immigrants, welcomes the newcomer, and it always has.
I grew up on 74th Street, but I didn't speak English. I spoke Slovak because I was in a 2-block Slovak radius.
You get communities of Czechs in the East 70s and Hungarians in the upper 70s and lower 80s, and then Germans farther north.
When I moved into the Upper East Side, to Yorkville technically, it was working class people. There are still a lot of people like myself who are not big wage earners, and we've been in our apartments a long time. We're in the neighborhood, so we're going to stay.
Well, the Yorkville portion of the Upper East Side had a history of housing that was affordable. Much of this was tenement housing, and that goes up into the latter part of the 20th century with Rupert Towers, for example.
The more ability an area has to integrate various socioeconomic levels, the richer that area is certainly going to be.
There are small businesses who have been here for decades that are the source of our community's character.
I just love small businesses generally. I'm so grateful that we're still able to do this and that my brother and I are still willing to do it, because quite honestly, we probably could rent the space for more than we make or as much as we make.
I feel like I've got a lot of pressure and a lot on my shoulders to keep this going. I think we owe it to the generations past to keep this thing going. There's not a lot of places in New York that have been open for 78 years.
We used to have a dozen bakeries within walking distance of here. Now, most of them are all gone. 86th Street used to be all small businesses. Now they're all gone, and it's changing. Still, there's some of the character left.
Anyone who thinks the future of any neighborhood in New York is settled is deluding themselves. Everything is always up for grabs.
Looking to the future, there are a number of changes that are coming to the Upper East Side that will change our way of life. Those include the opening of the 2nd Avenue subway, the development of huge high-rise buildings, the affordable housing that those buildings will displace, and the high commercial rents that are shuttering many of the businesses that define our neighborhood.
We are an area that is dominant with buildings, so whether it's advocating for more green spaces with parks or making sure that our schools have more space for children and families.
We want to make sure that the best of this neighborhood, what makes it very special to all of us who live here now, doesn't get lost amidst all these other changes.
Well, I don't think preservation is about saving everything. I don't have any problem with new construction. I think it needs to be appropriate to retain something of the scale of the neighborhood. You have that mix of the old and the new, and that's what makes a city exciting and dynamic.
I think that at this point, the younger generations that are taking over know that there's something that they have to hold on to, and they just can't let it go, because once it's gone, it's just gone forever.
I became a member of the community board because I wanted to feel anchored to the community and also have a voice and an input on what happens to businesses and what happens in the education system for children in this part of Manhattan.
Friends of the Upper East Side was conceived in the midst of a fight, and we realized that there needed to be a strong local voice for advocacy in the neighborhood.
Friends of the Upper East Side doesn't just protect landmark buildings or historic districts, it also protects the Upper East Side's culture, the Upper East Side's history, everything that makes the Upper East Side the place where people want to live.
Today, it's the eyes and the ears of the neighborhood. It's the most thoughtful group of residents, professionals, business people who really care about the district.
We recognize that there needs to be a balance. Transportation, like the 2nd Avenue subway, has always been a development driver, and that's on purpose, and that's a good thing. The goal is to strike a balance, and that's got to be a conversation with the city, with the neighbors and neighborhood groups like ours, with the community board. That's one of the things that we're trying to do now. We're trying to make sure that the future for the Upper East Side is as wonderful as its past.